I spent the last 6 weeks buying, testing, and comparing every major bottled water brand I could find on a regular grocery store shelf, and what I found changed the way I think about the bottle I grab on my way out the door every single morning. This isn't a sponsored video. Nobody paid me to say any of this, and by the end, you'll probably understand why no brand would want to pay for a video like this one. I bought spring water, purified water, mineral water, alkaline water, the store brand nobody thinks twice about, and the premium glacier-sourced bottle that costs 4 times as much, and I lined them all up on my kitchen counter like a science fair project that got a little out of hand. What started as a simple curiosity turned into one of the most unsettling deep dives I've done, because the more I learned about how these companies source, filter, bottle, and market their water, the more I realized most of us are making decisions based on a label designed to look trustworthy rather than actually be trustworthy. Let's start with the basic question almost nobody asks, which is where the water actually comes from before it ever reaches a shelf. The word spring on a label conjures an image of a mossy rock formation somewhere in the mountains with water trickling out of the earth, pure and untouched. But the legal definition of spring water is far looser than that image suggests. In most cases, a company only needs to prove that the water originates from an underground source that reaches the surface naturally at some point, and from there it can be collected through a borehole drilled directly into the aquifer, nowhere near the original spring, and still legally carry the word spring on the label. That doesn't necessarily mean the water is unsafe, but it does mean the picturesque story on the bottle and the actual industrial process behind it can be two very different things. Purified water, on the other hand, usually starts as regular municipal tap water that gets run through reverse osmosis, distillation, or deionization until the minerals and impurities are stripped out. Some brands are upfront about this, others bury it in small print on the back, right next to the recycling symbol, hoping you'll assume purified means something more exotic than tap water that went through an extra filter. Once I understood the sourcing, I wanted to actually test what was inside each bottle, so I sent samples out for independent lab analysis, rather than trusting the marketing claims printed on the label. This is where things got interesting, because the differences between brands weren't always what I expected. The cheapest, most generic-looking store brand in some cases tested cleaner than a premium bottle charging 5 times the price, largely because that store brand was using a straightforward purification process with tight quality control, while the premium brand's more natural sourcing method left it more exposed to environmental contaminants picked up on the way from ground to bottle. Meanwhile, the alkaline water brand that promises to balance your body's pH tested at a pH level barely different from ordinary tap water once the marketing language was stripped away. And there is still no strong scientific consensus that drinking alkaline water meaningfully changes your blood pH at all, since your body regulates that internally regardless of what you drink. I'm not saying alkaline water is dangerous. I'm saying you may be paying a premium for a health claim that doesn't hold up the way the label implies it does. The part of this investigation that surprised me the most wasn't bacteria or heavy metals, though those came up too in trace amounts across a few brands, well within legal limits but present nonetheless. It was microplastics. Recent independent research, using newer, more sensitive detection technology, has found that a single liter of bottled water can contain hundreds of thousands of tiny plastic particles, many of them small enough to pass through the digestive system and into the bloodstream, something scientists are still working to fully understand the health implications of. This isn't unique to one brand or one company doing something wrong. It appears to be an industry-wide reality tied to the plastic bottle itself, the cap, and the bottling process, which means switching brands within the plastic bottle category likely won't solve the underlying issue. Water stored in plastic for extended periods, especially when exposed to heat during shipping or while sitting in a hot car or a warehouse without climate control, seems to shed more plastic particles into the liquid than water that's bottled and consumed relatively quickly. That single insight changed how I think about buying water in bulk and storing a case of it in the garage for months at a time. Then there's the economics of the whole industry, which honestly might be the most quietly outrageous part of this entire investigation. When you break the cost down to price per gallon, some premium bottled water brands cost more than gasoline and dramatically more than a gallon of tap water, which in most American cities costs a fraction of a cent. You are, in many cases, paying primarily for the bottle, the label design, the transportation, and the marketing story, rather than for meaningfully different water. That doesn't mean bottled water is a scam, because there are real situations where it's genuinely useful or necessary, like during a boil water advisory in areas where tap water quality is a legitimate concern, or simply for convenience while traveling. But it does mean the price tag is doing a lot of emotional and psychological work that has very little to do with what's actually inside the bottle. I found bottles marketed toward athletes with electrolyte enhancement that amounted to a pinch of sodium and potassium dressed up with premium packaging and a price nearly triple that of the same company's basic offering. I also want to talk about the taste test portion of this, because I did a genuinely blind comparison with a small group of people, none of whom knew which bottle was which. The premium glacier-sourced brand, the one with the most expensive marketing and the most dramatic backstory about pristine, remote mountains, did not win. It didn't even place in the top 3. The winner, by a noticeable margin, was a mid-priced spring water brand that most people would never think to reach for over the flashier options. And in second place was, almost comically, one of the purified store brands. This lines up with something food and beverage researchers have pointed out for years. When it comes to blind taste comparisons, brand perception and pricing often influence our enjoyment far more than the actual physical differences in the product. And water is one of the clearest examples of this effect, because the sensory differences between clean water sources are genuinely subtle to begin with. So where does that leave you standing in the beverage aisle trying to make a decision that doesn't require a chemistry degree? My honest recommendation after all of this testing is to stop chasing the label story and start looking for 2 things. A water quality report, which many brands will actually publish if you dig on their website or request it directly, and a reasonable price per ounce that isn't inflated by packaging design or a scenic photo of a mountain range. If you're specifically concerned about plastic exposure, look toward brands offered in glass or aluminum, or consider investing in a home filtration system paired with a reusable bottle, which in the long run is both dramatically cheaper and reduces the amount of time your water spends sitting in warm plastic before it reaches your mouth. None of this is about fear-mongering you into throwing out every bottle in your fridge tonight. It's about understanding that the water industry, like most of the grocery store, is built on storytelling as much as it's built on science, and once you can tell the difference between the two, you get to make the choice that's actually right for you instead of the one a marketing team spent months designing you to make. If this kind of investigation is useful to you, there are a lot more categories worth doing this same deep dive on, and I'd genuinely love to know which one you want me to tackle next.